I'm Peyton,
And I'm Owen,
and we're the hosts of the PDF files
where we break down primary sources.
and give you crash courses.
We go through the back door, fat pockets, blue scripts, pouring green and styrofoam.
So in today's episode, we're going to be talking about the 1845 Triennial Convention split within America. So you may be wondering, what is that? What is that, Owen? What is that, Peyton? Well, we're about to tell you. So essentially what happened in 1845, a Christian denomination, the biggest Baptist Protestant denomination in America, the Triennial Convention, split. It was a North and South split over the issue of slavery. So we're going to be talking about this and what it meant for the bigger context of the issue of slavery in America, especially with like Christian ideas and how they interacted with that. Wouldn't you say, Peyton?
Yeah. And in today's episode, we're just going to go over kind of the broad strokes of this. So we'll first start out talking about how it happened, the origins of everything, the slavery conflict, and then we'll kind of go into the Triennial Convention and how it was viewed and how it affected everything. We'll go into the disagreements between the North and South Baptists, how the different events actually happened, the regional differences, the theological defenses, and then some of the outside perspectives and how the conflict is representative in the broader conflict.
So let's back up a little bit. The origins of this split, of course, is the issue of slavery in antebellum America, right?
Yeah.
So what was slavery? I think we all kind of have a good idea. We learned about it in school and stuff, but just for a little context for our topic for this podcast, obviously slavery was huge for the economy of the South, especially the plantation economy is what they call it. So enslaved people were property of slave holders and they were forced to labor, obviously under harsh conditions. There were no laws protecting slaves for the most part. And cash crops like cotton and tobacco underpinned the entire economy of the South.
So Owen's talking about the South there and how they viewed it. I'm going to talk a little bit about how the North viewed it. So they argued that slavery was morally wrong and that it was incompatible with American ideals of freedom. But at the same time, many Southerners defended slavery as it was essential to the economy and just how people lived back then. So this really divided the regions of North and South America.
Yeah, I would really agree that slavery is incompatible with American ideas of freedom.
Yep, and that's why I said it. And then now that we have kind of the broader overall view of how slavery was in America, let's talk a little bit more about how it was in the Baptist community. So,
yeah, let's talk about that.
All right, so the North and South largely tolerated slavery. They didn't actively defend or condemn slavery. It was looked at kind of as just a thing that was pushed under the rug at the time until eventually it started to boil into something where it had to be confronted, and the North and South eventually were divided into a anti-slavery and then pro-slavery regions. So, Owen, tell us a little bit more about that.
So, obviously, we're talking about the split in the Triennial Convention and how it was split into a northern denomination, which at the time just stayed the Triennial Convention, and the South Baptist churches, they split, right? They became the Southern Baptist Convention. So, what's interesting about this, though, is that this seems to mirror the phenomenon that happened in America, like the widespread, the country, the nation of America. The South left. They seceded from the Union. They created their own state, the Confederate States, right?
Right.
And the North stayed as the United States of America, what we know as the Union at this time. So it's interesting to study the split of the Triennial Convention and how it kind of reflects 15 years earlier what happened in the broader political context of America. And it's also interesting because we get to talk about like the religious aspects of it too, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting because America is a majority Christian nation, so we get to kind of see the religious justifications or the religious critiques of a institution like slavery, which we will get into them more. There are a lot on both sides. So
the Triennial Convention was the main biggest Baptist denomination in America at the time.
mm-hmm.
It held together almost all of the Baptist churches at the time, but it treated slavery as a subject entirely off the table. So it wasn't pro-slavery, it wasn't anti-slavery, it was deliberately neutral on that theory because the convention's missionary mission was more important than taking sides on a political question. So now, Owen, tell us a little bit more about the ABHMS meeting.
Yeah, I would love to talk about that. So it's kind of interesting because up until this point, as Peyton was saying, like you were saying, how they really didn't want to take a side because they didn't want to fight. Obviously, they wanted to keep the Church of Christ together. That was kind of their idea. But then one day, the Georgia Baptist Convention, so each state had their own convention. That was part of the Triennial Convention, right? They applied for an enslaver named James E. Reeve to be appointed as a missionary for the convention, and he was denied the application. And it's important to realize in the application, basically they said that he was being applied because of his position as a slaveholder. And so his application was denied, and Georgia was accused of deliberately trying to disturb the deliberations of the board. Which I don't know, Peyton, you can say your ideas on this, but I feel like that kind of shows how they thought about it. They didn't want to disturb the deliberations of the board. They weren't really necessarily too caught up on the fact that he was an enslaver, but more on the fact that they were trying to stir the pot.
Right, yeah, no, I agree with you completely there that it was something that was they purposefully were trying to start something here. It wasn't just about the moral implications of slavery at the time.
Yeah, I would completely agree with you on that.
Making beach towels. Now that's serious business. The guys at SandCloud chose a serious business card. The Spark Cash Plus card from Capital One. Their business earns unlimited 2% cash back on everything they buy. Like this fabulous fabric. They get big purchasing power so their business can spend more and earn more.
Our 2% cash back helps us build our retail store.
You need a place to sell all these great looking towels. What's in your wallet?
So the Reeve case was the, I guess you could say, flashpoint of the slavery debacle within the Triennial Convention. But of course, the conflict had been building for years.
Yeah, flashpoint is a great way to put it. And before this time,
Thank you.
yeah, man, I got you. And before this, the North and South, and people all around had different opinions on slavery, whether they were pro or anti-slavery. It just wasn't brought up in the Baptist church yet.
Like officially, yeah.
Officially. So now that it's officially brought up, this really causes a split as those people's opinions really comes to the forefront.
Yeah. I feel like at this point everything kind of like escalated, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I would for sure say.
Like for example, like after the application denial, the whole Reeves application event, Alabama Baptists formally demanded that the Triennial Convention declare that slaveholders are eligible for all missionary and leadership positions. So they're demanding that the church takes an official stance on it. Which, I mean, that's kind of interesting because before this case, and this was in reaction to the case. So before this case, this sort of like talking about it out in the open, demanding that slavery be accepted. You know, it really wasn't you didn't see this before the case.
Right, I agree.
Yeah.
So the Triennial Convention refused this declaration, and the Southerners interpreted this refusal of this as an anti-slavery stance, meaning that they felt like their point was completely rejected and that Triennial Convention was pro-North at this point.
Trying to push out the slaveholders.
Right.
And the idea of slavery, right? This perception kind of led them to officially proceed with the formation of the Southern Baptist Convention. So this was held in Augusta, Georgia. And they talked about their departure from the congregation, or the convention, I should say, not as like, in any theological terms, not as much, more of like a defense of their rights within the denomination. So they were kind of defending their right as slaveholders to exist as a Baptist convention and the right to participate in church leadership and missionary work while holding enslaved people, because of course that's why they left, right, Peyton?
Right, yeah.
So,
like you said, the founding of the Southern Baptist Church was not just a disagreement over doctrine, but it was a statement that slaveholding was compatible with Christian ministry, and that Southern Baptists would be able to build their own structure rather than follow one that they believed was attacking them and attacking their beliefs on slavery.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, this kind of looks more like a material disagreement, wouldn't you say? Like they're disagreeing over their rights to be in a denomination. But obviously, this is a religious group, so they do have to have theological justifications for their beliefs, especially, you know, whether they can own slaves or not.
Yeah, that was a great way to put that. And at this point, the South believed that it was scripturally okay to have an enslaved person treated with care, as they believed that this was Christianizing Africans through spiritual mercy and showing them Christianity firsthand.
So, as the Southern Baptists kind of saw themselves as bringing Christianity, humanity, civilization to Africans or enslaved people, the North Baptists countered, and there's a document called the Northern Perspective, which details the Northern perspective of the issue of slavery from a Baptist perspective, obviously, that slavery was fundamentally incompatible with the gospel teaching on human dignity. So instead of bringing humanity to these enslaved people, they already believed that they already were humans, made in the image of God, and they emphasized the biblical themes of justice, mercy, love, especially teachings like the golden rule, treating people how you want to be treated. I don't know about you, Peyton. I don't want to be treated like a enslaved person.
You know, Owen, I have to completely agree with that. I think that's just such a good point and such a fair statement.
Yeah, I probably will have to side with the Northern Baptists on this issue. Um, it's also good to keep in mind that there was, of course, a spectrum. There were, people who were a little less strict about it. Maybe they wanted to still be in the denomination with Southern Baptists. They just disagreed on the issue of slavery. But there were also those who were complete abolitionists, wanted the entire system of slavery gone, and did not want to commune with Southern Baptists. So now, Peyton, that we have a good idea of like what the split was and the events that led up to it and the what the actual event of the split, how that occurred, I think we should talk about how this split kind of reflects how deeply the issue of slavery divided American society.
Yeah, yeah. I think Owen, that is a great transition point here, and I think it's a perfect thing to talk about, and really important for really all of history in general.
I think kind of what interests me the most is that slavery was such a controversial issue that there were religious disagreements over it, and entire denominations, entire churches split over the issue. And I think that is kind of interesting because maybe it reflects even a little bit about today. What are the most controversial issues? Of course, LGBT issues, abortion. These issues are highly contested within religious spheres. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I think that's a great point, and I think it does really reflect today's society in religion and outside of religion in just politics as well.
Yeah. Yeah, so coming back to like our 19th century context, um, it's also kind of interesting because it really does kind of mirror the Civil War itself, just obviously on a bit of a smaller scale. The Southern Baptist Convention seceded from the Triennial Convention, forming their own new church. And what's that similar to?
Dude, Civil War, Confederates, bro.
Yeah, the Confederates split and they created their own state. So I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, I have to completely agree with you there. And you find that interesting, but for me, what I find interesting is looking at how Confederates would look at slavery in context with the Constitution and how it mirrors how they looked at slavery and religion and that mirror and how that caused a split between the North and South in the Civil War and then how it caused a split here with the Triennial Convention.
Right, even beyond the Constitution, like the Declaration of Independence, that we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, and they politically they disagreed over whether slavery
All right, so now I think it's important to talk about Black Baptist perspective at this point and how they felt about the Baptist denomination.
Right.
So obviously, they didn't agree with the pro-slavery sentiment, but actually, a lot of enslaved Africans were drawn to the Baptist denomination, specifically the North, that were anti-slavery, because Baptists aligned with their cultural traditions and how their spiritual meaning during slavery. So during this time, looking at a secondary source here, um, Nicole Dunkman Smith wrote an article that talks about how rather than passively accepting Christianity, enslaved people actively were reshaped, and that they blended their African religious ideas, like the concept of something called a sacred cosmos, which is a deeply connected, ever present God, and they connected that with Baptist beliefs. So then they actually were converted into being Baptists because of the teachings that were in the Northern Church. And this just expanded the Baptist religion across America and through enslaved people.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting. So I'm glad that you brought that source up. So let's look at the bigger picture here and the longer legacy of this conflict. Do you know what the largest Protestant denomination is in America?
I'm going to say Southern Baptist.
Yeah, the Southern Baptist Convention. So it's kind of interesting to see how a organization that was birthed from a disagreement over slavery. So it's kind of interesting to see how the Southern Baptist Church actually reckons with this origin of their organization. In 2023, the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary actually put out a statement acknowledging their past and committing to a more equitable minded future within the organization. Now, Peyton, what do you think the ethnic makeup of the modern SBC is?
Well, I'd probably say predominantly white.
It is predominantly white. Over 85% of the members of the SBC in modern day are white. What do you think the percentage of the black population in this church is?
Ooh, I'd probably say less than 5%.
Close, roughly 6%. So it's kind of interesting to see how there are a lot of black churches. I think around 4,000 predominantly black churches within the Southern Baptist Convention. But it's even today in the South, which has the largest concentration of African Americans in all of America, it's still almost completely white congregations that make it up. And this can really be drawn back to the origins of the Southern Baptist congregation and how black communities obviously did not feel very comfortable being a part of that organization. And many of them formed independent black congregations and black organizations. So it's kind of interesting to see how those have ramifications on the modern day, I think.
Yeah, I think that's actually really interesting, and I think that's a really good point to bring up. I mean, roughly 6%, that's pretty small, and I think it shows that a lot that they really felt the need to separate themselves into a different organization even today.
Yeah, right. All right, so I thought that was a pretty interesting episode.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think we really covered a lot of how the Southern and Northern Baptist churches split and how it still is functioning today and how it's still predominantly white today.
Yeah, I think it's also just very interesting to look at how big these big issues, slavery, and as we talked about a little, even modern issues, abortion, LGBTQ issues, how they are viewed in a religious lens as well. I mean, religion is it's such a strong force in the public mind, especially in a country like America, where historically has been a very religious country. And as we see in the modern day, it's beginning to decline a little bit, but just examining these issues through religious lenses, it's very interesting to me. I mean, people have very strong ideas about religion, so it's very interesting to see how those kind of ideas guide them.
Yeah, yeah, I agree completely. And I think it's very interesting to see how this mirroring of the Civil War in the Baptist Church and how it's mirroring itself today and how yeah, like how today we still do the same things that we did back then, and how it all just history repeats itself over and over again.
Yeah, the way in which the split of the Triennial Convention mirrored the Civil War, and it was its predecessor by, I think over 15 years, is very interesting to me. So, yeah, I mean, I think that was a great episode. Um, any closing thoughts?
No, I just want to thank everyone for listening to the PDF Files podcast. Tune in next time when we talk about
More fun stories from history.